everyone, and welcome back to the trading floor. I'm with Tom. Hello, Tom.
Hello there.
Today we are looking at an article that's talking about how young people are more reliant on credit cards than ever before. I think we know that the economy is not in the greatest shape right now, and people don't have a lot of money. They may turn to more borrowing, and obviously this is having a effect on young people. Tom, do you want to quickly go into some of the details that's in this article?
Yes. So I think the key point is that obviously the number of overall credit card accounts has grown by 5.48 million to a total of 578.35 million, which is a significant amount of people. Obviously the total number itself is very large, however the actual amount it's grown by is very, very large in that period of time. Obviously in the second quarter that the Federal Bank of New York released. However, there is also the point to mention that the outstanding credit balances have hit $1.03 trillion, which is up from 4.6%. So I think there's obviously the balance of, in this context, when it is about young adults, I think it's more likely that they'll say it's having a negative effect. However, you obviously have to know and mention the fact that credit cards can actually be good if you use them right and you know how to use them right.
Yeah, because the study in this article is simply pointing out that the study found that 53% of millennials and 41% of Gen Z, of the people that responded, are more reliant on credit cards. But that doesn't necessarily mean they have a negative effect on them. A large amount of them could be using it well, but we do know that young people who may not have a lot of money, especially in the modern day, may not have the money to keep paying that back off. So I think this article is more like a wariness thing, saying these are the statistics, take what you will out of it, but we do know that younger people most likely cannot maybe afford to pay this back the same that people of the older generation can do.
Yeah, I think there's interesting points to mention in this and interesting ways which you can imply it. Saying that the survey of about 1,000 cardholders found that 38% were using it to make ends meet. Obviously, that's a negative thing from the perspective of the cardholders. Then you also have saying the fact that 18 to 29-year-olds had the highest delinquency rates. You have things like saying almost half of millennials and 55% of those earning under 50k say that they didn't see an end in sight and they live paycheck to paycheck. However, I would say that, and you can ask yourself this question, anyone who's watching, if you were to double your salary, would you still live paycheck to paycheck? You most likely would, right? I think it was, I can't remember who did the study, but there was something which said that people are even on 100, 150k still live paycheck to paycheck, because the more you earn, the more likely that you are to spend money. In economics, it's like the marginal propensity to consume. As you increase your earnings and your income, you're more likely to spend on things, which means that you're in no better position than you were previously. So it's like, okay, you have a credit card, right? If you were to suddenly earn a lot more money, unless you, I guess, immediately cleared it and closed it and got rid of it and threw it away and potentially didn't reap some of the benefits of it, then you're saying that actually, well, nothing's going to change for you. I think it's not necessarily the card itself that is the problem. Yeah.
A lot of the time it is the people that are using it, because there's plenty of people who have credit cards, pay it off on time and can reap the benefits from it and use the rewards that the card gives you. But there are also a large amount of people, and I know people personally, who just live paycheck to paycheck, live month by month, and whenever they want something and they can't afford it, just get it on card. And that's what ties people down later on in life, and that's what stops people from being able to make investments in themselves and investments in their future, because they're tied down in all of this debt that now they have to keep on working, and it's harder to put money aside to try invest and use that money to turn it into more money, because when you have to month by month keep paying money towards things that you couldn't afford at the time, now you have less money to dedicate to other important areas. So Tom, do you think this is a negative thing, this article? Do you think it's pointing at a negative thing?
I think it's overall highlighting the negative fact that credit cards are having on, especially young adults and particularly students. I think is probably the most prominent, demographic that will be targeted or affected by this sort of thing. If they're relying it for, to pay student loans or potentially, medical bills in America and things like that. I think saying that I think that the key problem is the fact that if interest rates are around double digits, in some cases 20% or more, then it's very hard to, once you're in that sort of situation, to get out of it. Like, we're talking about it from the perspective where we're potentially not in that situation, whereas if you're already in that situation and interest rates are obviously increasing, so obviously for the Federal Reserve to try and combat inflation and everything that's been caused from the last, few years, it's not likely to get any better anytime soon. I can't remember, I don't know who did the estimates, but it was like estimated that credit card fees, I think it's $120 billion worth of money that actual consumers and Americans pay at the moment. I think it's like each year, which is a significant amount of money. And obviously if you're paying that, if you're paying interest rates and you're paying fees, it means that you're not paying off the card, right? Because if you paid off the card, in most cases you won't have any interest, because you'll just be doing it to claim points. If you're doing it for Amex rewards, or if you're doing it for miles, or whatever I guess benefits you have on the cards, whether you're using it for lounges and things like that. In most cases your interest rates payments will be very, very small, if at all in some cases, whereas if you're paying 20%, it means that you potentially don't have the money in the first place to pay it off. So
exactly,
it just goes into a worse and worse position.
Yeah, if you're young and you want to get a credit card, I think, do you recommend getting it? Because I recommend getting a credit card, but I also do advise you, of course, have to be careful with what you spend, and you should only really spend on things that you can afford. For example, if you're young, you're living on your own, and you have a food bill that you pay every month, put it on the credit card, because you can pay that back. You have to pay that back, because you wouldn't be buying that food unless you had that money in your debit account anyway. So I'd say get a credit card if you're young, but of course you always have to be careful, and that's not financial advice. We have to say that's not financial advice, but I do think most people should get a credit card, but always be careful.
Yeah, personally I think you should, because I think it teaches you a lot of financial morals and literacy and understanding how you can build up your credit score, and that is not always a bad thing. The higher your credit score, the more likely you could potentially be offered a better mortgage in the future, or those other aspects. Personally, I think you should almost treat it like a charge card, which, for those people that don't know what that is, it works the same as a credit card, but you have to pay it back every month, and there's no exceptions. If you don't pay it back, then there's late penalty fees, but it's not like an interest where you can accumulate it for a few months. If you don't pay it back, then that's it, sort of thing. Like you'll get your card terminated and things like that. So if you treat it like that, where you have to pay it back, then it's different to say, well, actually I can just keep spending what's not yours, because that's what you're doing, right? If you have a credit card, you're paying for things, you're not actually paying for it. You're buying things that's not actually yours. And I think it's very important to say you can't have what you can't afford. You may want this, you may want that. If you can't afford it, you can't have it. Sometimes you just have to realize what's important. Obviously, I think the situation in terms of students, if they're using it to pay off things like student loans and college and university fees and things like that, it's slightly different. I think it works slightly different in America than it does in the UK. I think we have a slightly better student loan system in the UK, whereby you get the money and then it's paid back through your income later down the line when you earn over, is it about £25,000 or something, whatever it is at the moment, rather than actually having to pay it all yourself and work it out in that way. And in things like that in America, obviously you have other costs and expenses on top of everything, especially if, I don't know, if you don't have much time to work, depending on obviously what type of student you are and things. But the important thing is, if you're not in that situation, try to prevent yourself ever getting in that situation, but also understand there can be benefits to using it right. Yeah,
and do remember, guys, having a credit card and not paying it back on time isn't just the only penalty, is just having a higher increase in how much you need to pay next month. It can affect your credit score as well, and if your credit score is affected, it can be harder to take out other loans. It can be harder to take out a mortgage when you eventually want to get a house. So don't think that, I've missed a payment, it's fine, I'll just pay it off. Because especially if you keep on doing this and keep on doing this again and again and again, then your finances aren't going to be looking great, and it's going to be harder and harder for you to be able to get a house, which is a major investment that a lot of people should look into later on in life when they can afford it. So always be careful with credit cards, but they are a really useful tool. You can get great benefits out of it. Especially as you move up the financial ladder, more and more great benefits.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one, right? Because it depends what perspective you're looking at the problem from. If you're in that position, like the article says, it's very hard to you're facing an uphill battle where at the moment interest rates are going to continue to rise because they're trying to reduce inflation and all the economics and things that go along with that. It's one of the key ways to do it. So if you're trying to decrease your debt and they're increasing interest rates, then the money that you've borrowed you're going to have to pay a lot more, and then it puts you in an even worse position. And especially if you're a student, right, you're likely not earning as much as most people. Obviously, if you have things going on outside of potentially your work and other things, but if you're full-time studying, you don't have the same amount of time to work as other people potentially do. I'm not saying it's impossible, because I think it is important to... I think people just need to believe in themselves, right? If you want to start online side hustle, go for it. Do whatever you have to do. Put the hard work in, put the graft in, and it's not an impossible battle, but I think it is important to understand that for a lot of people it is difficult, and sympathizing with that. But at the same time, if you're not in that position already, try to prevent yourself from getting in that position, because if you don't have the money, you can't pay it back, right? Nothing's going to make that happen. So don't get yourself into a position where you're going to have to pay back 20% more. If you don't have 0, you don't have an extra 20%,
Exactly. A lot of it comes towards, I would say greed, but it's not necessarily the right word, but it does come towards I want this now. It's when you look at something, maybe a new phone, for example, and you're like, I really want this now, and I can afford it over the next 4 paychecks. And that's okay, If you can finance it over the next 4 paychecks if you want to, but then remember, you're tied down to those next 4 paychecks. If you wait until those next 4 paychecks are out and they're in your account, you can afford the phone and you don't have any worries about having to have 4 months of being tight on money. You can just save the money that you have, and if you need to use that money while you're saving, you can use it. You've got no worry about, you just may have to put your phone back by a month or so. So that's why I always recommend buying things outright rather than financing. But Tom, do you have any final thoughts on this topic before we wrap up this video?
Yeah, I think it's just important to understand that, there's a difference between luxuries and necessities, and especially I think younger people in what they're saying in this article is that they are struggling based on statistics and based on surveys and stuff that they've done. It may not necessarily be, young people all wanting to go and buy a brand new iPhone 15 in the next month. They're using it and they're in these problems because they have student loans and fees and all sorts of education fees, whether it's medical bills or food bills or stuff like that. And it's just, I guess, understanding, first of all, if you're gonna decide to go into something like this or use a car like this, first of all, try and understand the economic perspectives and aspects and external influences that could happen. You could get a car today and suddenly the economy starts to recover very, very quickly. The interest rates go down to, 3%. It's a lot better than 20%, but in the same way they could increase interest rates even further because of the problems with inflation. I think it's just important to understand that, but also try and there's a lot of asymmetric information, especially in credit, whatever country you're in, right? The banks will try and make as much money as they can from you because that's their job, right? They have to invest the money to make money, and the way they do it is obviously by receiving money from interest and things like that. So it's just about, if you do decide to enter into it, make sure you read the documents, and if you don't understand it, ask questions. And I think the perspective on credit card is different in the UK compared to in America. Because I think someone said to me before, they were like, well, why don't, because obviously we have the Discord server, they were like, well, why can't I just get a credit card, invest $1,000 invest $1,000 because they're in America on a credit card, I'll earn back however much I make, say, 10% in a week, because they invest it in whatever stocks. They're essentially investing risk-free, but I think that's the wrong perspective to have on it. You should use it for things, if you have a regular phone bill, if you have a regular food bill, if you have things like that where you can use it to gain points, gain air miles and things like that, where you can gain benefits from it. Or if you potentially have to use it for other things, then that's what you have to do. But don't. I think the perspective is different here. You know, a lot of people, I think especially older generations, are very much against it. They think if you don't have the money, you shouldn't have it. You shouldn't be able to pay for it. Don't do it. But if you understand the benefits you can gain from it, then you might as well. But at the same time, just make sure you pay it off. And if you know you won't have the money to do it in the first place, don't buy it. Obviously, if you're comparing a student loan to a new phone, it's a very different argument, but the same sort of principles apply.
Yeah. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Let us know in the comments, do you have a credit card, do you spend well with it, or are you a bit on the ropes with it? We'll talk to you guys later. Tom, do you have anything to say before we head off?
Drop a like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. We'll see you later, guys.